Hey everyone, this is Lomi, and today I'm making the gambeson for my ongoing project of creating an outfit for my doll Vahn, who is an House SID Claude and represents a character from my epic fantasy book series, The Snake's Blood Saga. This is kind of not a tutorial so much as me just making something and taking you along for the ride. I've got some questions people have asked that I'll be answering, and I'll just kind of talk a bit about this project and what it's like coming at it from a place of hobby burnout, because I kind of learned some stuff about myself while doing it and found it interesting. This video was going to be a tutorial, but I had problems with my camera again, and I guess that's an indication I need to go ahead and get a new camera for filming like I've been thinking about. I miss the quality I had when I used my DSLR, but it just developed too many hot pixels to look good when recording, especially since most of them were right in the middle of the frame. So I'll probably look into that soon, just not until after Christmas. Anyway, you could probably make something like this if you follow along, and the pattern will be up on my website for download before long. It's just not there yet. Soon, but not yet. It's been a busy time for me. I've been sick and getting the 5th book in my current ongoing epic fantasy series ready for release, but that happened this week and now I get to move forward with other things. It's an interesting time for me, and since I haven't been posting stuff regularly while I sort out my feelings of hobby burnout and deciding how to address it, it's also been a really introspective time for me. There's probably something poetic that could be said about the change of seasons and moving into this kind of hibernatory state where my hobby activity is at rest and I'm doing all this soul searching and self-evaluation of where I am in my creativity, but unfortunately my skills with words only really exist when I'm writing and not when they're coming out of my mouth. So I'll let you figure out some really smart thoughts along those lines, and I don't know, you can leave them in the comments for me to check out and probably agree with or something. For now, I'll kind of lead into everything by saying I did a few new things with this project. I wanted it to be proper padding in a realistic size, and I wanted it to be relatively flexible because I knew it would be thick. So I decided to use a really thin white cotton as a lining to help prevent staining, white fleece for the padding because it's poofy but also stretchy and soft so it flexes easily, and the blue layer is actually from a set of bed sheets that wore out because I absolutely loved the color and the sheen of the fabric. The sidewalls of the fitted sheet had basically no wear on them, and it seemed like a waste of really nice fabric, so I just cut it up and kept a piece to make this. I wanted my quilting stitches to be visible, and I didn't want to fight with inserting a lining where you couldn't see the seams, so I decided to quilt it all together using black polyester thread. I didn't want any hint of white to be visible on the top, so I used black thread on the underside too, but I've tested this particular thread and found it to be really color fast, so I don't have to worry about it discoloring my doll's resin. Polyester thread on cotton fabric brings its own issues. It is, I guess you could say, sharper than cotton thread, so poly thread can eventually cut through cotton fibers and weaken a garment overall, but I don't think that's an issue for doll clothing. People clothing, sure, but doll clothing will never see the kind of wear or movement that would facilitate that kind of damage on people-sized clothes. I also went into this with no real idea how I wanted to do the quilting. Originally I thought diamonds, then I liked the diagonal stripes I had going on the sleeves, so I decided to leave them that way for visual interest. I considered vertical stripes on the body of the gambeson, and I didn't like how it looked when I drew guidelines on the fabric with a water-soluble pencil, so I ultimately made the very poor decision to decide later and just went ahead with figuring out the construction of this piece. Normally when I share patterns or sewing videos, I have already done a lot of practice runs to work out the kinks and figure out the best or easiest way to put something together. And I didn't do that this time, so seeing me kind of muck up the quilting is sort of a unique experience where you can watch me figuring things out. It's also a great indicator that I got lucky with this by just deciding I didn't care how it turned out, since this piece of the outfit won't even be visible once he has his chainmail on. In that respect, I didn't need to make it functional, or even attractive, but why do something if you're not going to be ridiculous about it, right? I ultimately decided to do diamonds on the body, but I didn't measure anything and kinda decided to wing it using my handy measurement guide foot, but I didn't trust myself to remember the right notch, so I marked it with a Sharpie. I can just wipe that off with some hand sanitizer later. I drew a line to get the first line of stitching on there, but then everything else was winging it, so the diamonds on the front and the diamonds on the back ended up being a slightly different shape due to the steepness of the angle. And as I was doing it, I decided I really did not care. Even if I take photos of the doll in just this, you'll never see the diamonds on the front and the back at the same time, so what does it even matter? If I were filming a proper tutorial for this, I'd probably make sure the angle was the same so the diamonds would be uniform, and I'd probably also recommend quilting all the pieces before assembly, just because it would be a lot easier to do, but I honestly didn't find quilting it after the fact to be all that hard. Slower, but not really harder, and quilting took up the most time. So the quilting is really sped up, but it's also kind of boring, so great time to answer the questions I had sitting in my inbox. Let's go. First question is, what dolls have you been considering adding to your lineup? And I guess the last video I shared was kind of an early spoiler for that, since you saw me unbox my Feeple 65 Rosen head. So he'll need a body, and there are a couple blind box dolls I've seen that I would love to get to make into customs, but right now is mostly deciding if I'm going to replace the white resin doll sheet body I got with the new Impel Doll Muscular Girl that's coming soon, and finishing sculpting some heads for my book characters Garam and Sarah. Next up, how do you choose a doll to shell your characters? This might be a boring answer, but since they're all book characters of mine, I have really clear mental images of what they look like, and I just kind of see what's available out there and try to match the picture in my head. That's probably why I tend to prefer more mature or realistic sculpts, because in my head they're real people. Sometimes I see a doll that leaps out at me as like, oh yeah, that's this character. That happened with Vahn, and sometimes what I find doesn't necessarily match features exactly, but does capture the vibe or personality I see in a character, which is what happened with the Rosen head. He doesn't look exactly how I picture Kefel, but there's a certain melancholy to his face that feels really Kefel to me. Next is, how do you choose which project to work on? And there are two ways I choose. One is picking which I'm most excited about working on, and the other is which I feel most guilty about not working on. This project for Vahn is definitely guilt-inspired. Next up, what are the steps you follow when planning a project? I sort of start with the visual concept, like the sketch I did for this outfit. Then I make a list of all the materials I'll need for the project and order them ahead of starting anything. And when things arrive, I usually try to work in layers. So bottom layer first and work my way out, with the idea being that I can dress the doll as I go and never have to back up. Like, I won't start with shoes, because when you get dressed, shoes go on last. I try to break down each piece of the project into steps I can put on my Kanban board, and then just work on each of those micro goals when I have time. Next question is really funny to me, and it is, did you ever get around to repairing your sweatshirt cuffs? So months ago it became very obvious that my favorite hoodie had seen better days, and after one of the puppies we had was done with my sleeves, they looked pretty rough. Then suddenly they were better, but it was obviously the same hoodie. So what happened? No, I didn't fix them, but my husband just bought me a replacement, which was great because the company that made that design has gone out of business. I've had this one for like a year, and our subsequent foster dogs have not destroyed my jacket, but wearing the same hoodie every day forever means I'm starting to see wear on those cuffs too. And that's fine, because I kept the old one so I can repair it before this one wears out. Next one was interesting. Do you ever allow your sewing patterns to be used to make things to sell? If you've ever looked at my patterns, you'll see the pattern page and all the patterns themselves say personal use only, and that's because I have always felt like if someone makes money off stuff sewn from my patterns that I am offering for free, it should be me. Unfortunately, I do get a lot of people who ignore that rule and try to sell stuff made from my patterns, and will even lie to my face and claim they made the pattern themselves, as if I'm not going to recognize the exact fit of a garment I designed. But there is a very small handful of close friends who approached me about commercial usage, and I have given them permission to sell stuff based on my work. Other than that, no, I haven't. I have considered offering paid licenses for patterns though, that would allow people to sell things they make from that pattern, but I don't know if it's something anyone would even be interested in, so it's not something I've looked into further. Last question today is, are you going to stop making doll videos? I know this comes in response to my last video, which was talking all about my hobby burnout and just not really feeling like doing anything with my dolls right now. So short answer to make you feel better, no, I'm not planning to stop. I still like the process, I like the community, and I like sharing what I'm working on, but how I approach that sharing will probably be less structured and less scheduled, at least until I reach a place where I feel like I can make stuff with the same frequency I was doing. And that's actually a nice segue into all my deep thoughts I had while working on this, because as I worked on this project, I realized it was interesting to me because it was different. And I think doing it helped reveal some things that led to my feelings of hobby burnout and also taught me a lot about myself. And that's interesting because I guess you never really stop learning about yourself and what makes you tick. This far into adulthood, it kind of feels like I should have myself figured out, especially since I'm the kind of person who always knew exactly what I wanted to do with my life, from the time I was a really little kid. And that's been something that's been on my mind while I worked on this, because it was really revealing about the sort of stage I'm in. And I don't know if it's something anyone will relate to. It's possibly a unique problem to have, and definitely a very privileged position to be in, but I suspect people run into it a lot more than we talk about. We always talk about not knowing what you're doing with your life, but never anything about when you do know, and when you go through your whole life pursuing the things that mean the most to you, and then you do all of it. What happens when everything you set out to do in life is done? When I was a kid, I had this idea of what I wanted my life to be, and I really threw myself into it wholeheartedly from the time I was very young. I knew I wanted to get married, I wanted to be a mom, I wanted a 2-story house with room for a great big Christmas tree and a library. I wanted to drive a Mustang, I wanted to write a few specific stories and reach some level of success as an author. This was, in my head, exactly what my life was meant to be, and I guess I had always assumed it was something that would take a whole life's work to get there. I married youngish at 21, and a lot of people criticized that decision because they felt I was too young to know what I wanted out of life, but I really honestly did. My husband has always been a really encouraging and supportive partner, and we've been so blessed to be able to go through this life together, helping push the other toward what we want to do from an early stage of adulthood. So we had adventures. He worked on his education, and I worked on my books, and we both worked weird and fun jobs along the way. I bought myself the Mustang I always daydreamed about, and we worked our way up to buying a fixer-upper house with a ceiling high enough for a 14-foot tall Christmas tree, where you have to stand in the library and lean over the rail to put on the star. Then I published the first of 2 stories I'd lived my whole life wanting to tell. I didn't have high expectations because I was just a little independent author, but it won a literary award and it spent a week as an international bestseller. And then I published the second of the 2 stories I always wanted to write, and it won a literary award too. And the weird thing about dreams is that for a lot of people, they move the goalposts along the way, and they always have a new thing to aim for, a new target to hit. But I never did that, because I never thought the stuff I wanted was actually achievable. And eventually I ended up in this really surreal spot where I stood looking at the ceiling and thinking about Christmas trees, and I thought, what now? Because I always thought that once you reached the destination, you'd be satisfied. But part of the human experience is craving something new. So when you get to the end and you never made any new targets, what now? And as I was mulling this over, I had kind of a blinding realization that part of what makes me feel so disenchanted with my hobby and what I've been working on is that so little of it is new. For years, I've always had projects that challenged me to learn new things. To learn to sew and then learn to do it well enough to show others. To try a new art supply, a new fiber for making wigs, to take up sculpting and then casting and face-ups and eye making, and there was always something new and fresh and a new target to hit until suddenly there wasn't. And everything I was doing was just something I'd done before. And there wasn't anything new to try. So in the absence of new targets and that something new and different to work on or work toward, I found myself sort of operating on instinct, getting the new dolls that I shared last time, because part of me already knew that it was that absence of freshness that made me feel stuck. Just a little misguided because the new that was a new doll wasn't the new of a new experience. I'd never considered myself to be the kind of person who actively sought new experiences either. But it's clearer in retrospect, and I think that's part of what makes me love writing so much as my main thing. Because every time I start work on a story, it's something new, something different and fresh, and that's probably why after so many years and so many books, I still find myself gravitating to it at every turn. So now that I have this new knowledge about myself and how I operate, it should let me help figure out how to set goals that help attract a feeling of that missing newness in a way that enriches my hobbies and everything surrounding them. I don't know how to go about that just yet, just like how I don't know how to go about setting new life goals, but I'm much too young to have a midlife crisis, so I'm just going to call it a new season. and spend some time thinking on how to restructure my plans and goals, and maybe come up with some new dreams too. And speaking of dreams, I stopped short of finishing the buckles on this, because a very dear friend of mine arrived to spend the night at my house after flying cross-country to pick up her dream car and drive it home. I'll have to sew these on by hand, so it'll take some time, but I think the general design of the gambeson is clear enough that you can imagine what it'll be like with a strap and buckle on the collar and some down the front. So that's all for today. I talked a whole lot and it was probably weird, so if you stuck around this long, thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Bye.